Hi, my name is Rob Miletto. I am a consultant ecologist, and today we'll be looking at woodland habitats that we're mapping as part of the Nature Recovery Network mapping project. Today we're looking at woodlands. I'm in this lovely leafy woodland on Llanimannoch Nature Reserve, Shropshire Wildlife Trust Nature Reserve. In Shropshire, there are three woodland types that are habitats of principal importance. They are lowland mixed deciduous, lowland beech and yew, and wet woodland. This morning we're going to look at lowland mixed deciduous. So there's a number of trees that can dominate or even co-dominate in lowland mixed deciduous woodland, and by dominating I mean they have to make up more than 50% of the canopy. One of the trees to look for is sycamore. Now strictly that's not a native, but it's been in UK for so long that it's treated as a native. And sycamore is quite distinctive because it has this smooth grey bark. It's a bit like beech, but the leaves are very different from beech. The leaves are maple-like. If you know the Canadian flag, that's a maple leaf. Sycamore is one of the maples. It's got this leaf with lobes, and each leaf is lobed again. So you get this maple-like appearance there. So one of the characteristic trees of lowland mixed deciduous HoPI is oak. There are two species of oak, but you can just call it oak, that's fine. And most people are familiar with oak because it's got a very distinctive leaf and obviously the acorn, which is used on symbols all over the place. They're often high up in the canopy. You can't easily find the leaves, so look on the ground. You can find last year's leaves or you can find young seedlings. They both have this very lobed appearance. So there's lobes all the way around the leaf, going back down to the leaf base there. And if you find these, then you've got oak in the canopy. So the leaves of oak are really the most distinctive thing that you should be looking for, but the bark has a distinctiveness as well. It's sort of a mid-grey green, and it has often deep fissures, especially in older trees, so look out for those. So another distinctive tree of lowland mixed deciduous HoPI is the ash tree. Ash trees are relatively distinctive. The bark is often this lighty brown colour with either no or very shallow striations on the bark, but really it's the leaf that you're looking for. Again, a lot of the leaves are high up in the canopy, so try and find some little shoots at the bottom like this one. And then if you look at the leaf is actually broken down into leaflets. The whole of this structure here is a leaf, and these are called leaflets, and they're opposite each other until you get to the end, and there's a terminal leaflet. So if it has this strange structure where there's leaves opposite each other and at the end a terminal one, you've probably got an ash tree there. Another tree that's quite distinctive of lowland mixed deciduous woodland HoPI is birch. There are two species of birch, but for the purposes of our mapping project, just count them as birch. And most people know them by having this lovely whitish bark that's often quite papery. But be careful, because when they're young like this one, the bark hasn't developed the white colour and is sort of a dark grey colour. The other thing to look for is the leaves. There's some leaves here, and you can see they're quite distinctively triangular in shape, and each leaf has got tiny teeth on the edges. So those two characteristics should help you distinguish birch trees in lowland mixed deciduous woodland. So one of the other native trees that you find in lowland mixed deciduous woodland is lime. There are a number of species of lime, but they all count. And the way really to check if it is a lime that you're looking at is a very heart-shaped leaf. You can see it's rounded, but it dips just at the stalk there, giving it a heart shape. And through most of the spring and summer, there's also this winged flower that turns into little bobbly fruits and flutters down to the ground when it's ripe. So one of the woodland HoPIs that we're trying to identify and map is lowland beech and yew woodland, and it's a relatively easy one to identify because you're only really looking for two plants. One is beech trees, and they're quite obvious because they've got this smooth grey-green bark and leaves that look very leaf-like. They are elliptical, light green to start with, but turn darker green later in the summer, and then when they drop off they cover the ground in this lovely brown leaf litter that actually doesn't rot down very much, so you tend to find that it's quite bare underneath the beech trees. So that's a key characteristic of lowland beech and yew woodland. So the other tree that's characteristic of lowland beech and yew woodland is yew. And yew is only one of 3 native conifers. And it's quite distinctive because it's normally quite a small tree. It can grow very wide, but it's never very tall. And it's got these characteristic branches that have leaves going out either side horizontally, like this. And also later in the year, it has big, bright red berries on, which make it absolutely distinctive. So another of the woodland habitats of principal importance is called wet woodland. And as the name suggests, it tends to be on soggy soils. You can see I've got my wellies on here because it's a bit soggy underfoot. But really you need to be looking for the dominant trees. And by dominant, I mean they need to cover more than about 50% of the canopy. And what you're looking for is willows and alder trees. So identifying willow trees can be quite tricky because there's a number of species and there's no one-size-fits-all characteristic that says this is a sort of willow. The one behind me is a crack willow, and a crack willow often is multi-stemmed, and if you can see here they have thin, long, pointed leaves which are quite characteristics of crack willow. So another tree that can be dominant or co-dominant in wet woodland HoPI with willows is alder. This is an alder here. It's got quite bright green shiny leaves and they're quite rounded at the end. They're not pointed, and it's almost a round leaf, or if you hold it upside down it sort of looks a bit like a fat pear shape. Perhaps the classic feature about alder trees, it's the only native tree that has cones, and you can see these black little cones here. That is absolutely distinctive of alder trees. They're often multi-stemmed. You can see this one here has got 2 main stems and one stem has actually fallen this way and is growing up from a horizontal stem, and that's pretty typical of alder trees. So hopefully you've got a better idea now of how to identify the 3 types of HoPI woodland in Shropshire. You've got lowland mixed deciduous woodland, lowland beech and yew woodland and wet woodland. And the way to differentiate is really on the dominant and characteristic trees that we've run through in this video. But if you do get stuck, remember you can always turn to a friendly botanist, you can use a book to identify them, or there are even apps these days that will help you with plant identification.